At 38,000 feet over the Kansas plains, a woman worth $4.7 billion stopped breathing. 49 passengers watched her die. Some gasped, some prayed. A teenager in first class pulled out her phone and started live streaming, fingers trembling as she whispered, "Oh my God," for the algorithm. But in seat 29C, wedged between a broken tray table and a crying toddler, a black man in duct-taped sneakers stood up. His hands were calloused from loading delivery trucks at 4 a.m., strong and dark and steady despite the exhaustion. His 8-year-old daughter gripped a dollar store coloring book, their only entertainment for the 3-hour flight. His job interview was in Chicago in exactly 2 hours and 14 minutes. His last chance before eviction. He saved the billionaire's life in 3 minutes and 8 seconds. Then he disappeared. No goodbye. No thanks. No trace. What she discovered about him would destroy everything she thought she knew about power, privilege, and the invisible man whose wife died because people like her got rich off her suffering. Before we start the story, subscribe and comment below and let us know where you're watching from. Enjoy the story. Evelyn Whitmore arrived at her office before sunrise, as she had every morning for 12 years. The 52nd floor of Whitmore Tower stretched beneath floor-to-ceiling glass, Lake Michigan gleaming like liquid silver beneath her empire. Her coffee was black, 2 shots of espresso, no sugar. She didn't have time for indulgence. The Financial Times lay spread across her desk, red pen marking the mergers that mattered. 23 days until the PharmaCorp acquisition closed. Whitmore Enterprises valued at $6.8 billion. Her legacy finally cemented. Her phone buzzed. A text from Sebastian, her younger brother. Board raising concerns about the healthcare optics. Some members questioning your pharmaceutical investments. Dinner tonight. We need to talk strategy, Evie. She deleted it without replying. Sebastian had wanted her position since the day she took over the company at 29. 12 years he'd waited for her to falter. 12 years of smiling at shareholder meetings while sharpening knives behind closed doors. Her assistant, Grace Chen, appeared in the doorway. 61 years old, Silver Bob, the only person who dared tell Evelyn the truth. You look exhausted. When's the last time you ate something that wasn't catered from a conference room? Food is for people who aren't closing a $2.3 billion acquisition in 3 weeks. Grace studied her with the same look she'd given Evelyn since she was a junior analyst with something to prove. Your father worked himself into cardiac arrest at 53. Collapsed during a board presentation. You were 26 years old, just promoted to VP. Don't make me watch you follow his path. Evelyn said nothing. She turned back to her screen, dismissing Grace with silence. But the words lingered. 2,000 miles away, in a basement apartment in Gary, Indiana, Elijah Turner was counting pills. Not his pills. Hope's. The asthma inhaler on the card table had maybe 4 doses left. Maybe 5 if he was careful. The prescription refill cost $287. He had $193 in his checking account and $54 in cash, rubber-banded inside a coffee can beneath the sink. Hope sat cross-legged on the futon they shared, coloring a princess with a green crayon because the pink one had worn down to nothing. She was humming. She always hummed when she was pretending not to notice her father's panic. "Daddy, what time do we leave for the airport?" Elijah checked his phone. 6:47 a.m. The interview in Chicago was at 11:30. The flight left at 8:20. If they left now, if traffic cooperated, if TSA moved quickly, if nothing went wrong. Soon, baby. Go brush your teeth. She skipped to the bathroom, still humming. Elijah pulled the 2 crumpled Spirit Airlines boarding passes from his jacket pocket. Seat 29C and 29D. Economy. No checked bags. No carry-on fee. He'd sold plasma twice last week to afford them. $120 total, the bruises still purple in the crook of his elbow. This job interview was survival. $55,000 a year selling medical equipment. Health insurance. Stability. A chance to stop choosing between Hope's medication and rent. His phone buzzed. A text from his sister, Janelle. "You'll do great today. Hope's counting on you. We all are." He didn't reply. The weight of their expectations was already suffocating. His eyes drifted to the photograph on the card table. Sarah laughing, her arm around his waist at Navy Pier. 3 years ago. Before the diagnosis. Before the medical bills. Before the system that promised to save her instead bled them dry and let her die anyway. He touched the frame just once. Then he stood, grabbed Hope's backpack, and locked the door behind them. He had 2 hours and 14 minutes to make the most important meeting of his life. He had no idea that in 90 minutes, his hands would remember what it felt like to save someone, and that the woman he saved would become both his salvation and his reckoning. Evelyn Whitmore's office smelled like power. Leather and mahogany and the faint trace of bergamot from the diffuser Grace had placed on the credenza. The marble floors reflected the pre-dawn glow of Chicago's skyline. 1,000 lights blinking like obedient subjects. Her desk was a battlefield of quarterly reports, acquisition contracts, and pharmaceutical projections that would make her richer by noon. She scrolled through the PharmaCorp portfolio with one hand while signing off on a $40 million R&D budget with the other. Her pharmaceutical holdings had increased 34% this quarter. Insulin price adjustments. Patent extensions on cancer medications. Strategic denials on experimental treatments that weren't yet profitable enough to justify approval. The numbers were beautiful. Clean. Uncomplicated by the faces behind them. Grace appeared with her tablet. "Your car will be downstairs in 20 minutes. First-class ticket to San Francisco confirmed. The Venture Health CEO wants to finalize the acquisition terms over dinner at Gary Danko. I've sent the contract revisions to your phone." Evelyn nodded without looking up. "Tell Sebastian I won't make his dinner tonight. He can survive one evening without plotting my downfall." Grace almost smiled. "He's been plotting for 12 years. What's one more night?" The joke landed hollow. They both knew Sebastian was getting bolder. The board whispers were growing louder. One misstep, 1/4 of disappointing projections, and he'd have the ammunition he needed. Evelyn closed her laptop. Her reflection stared back from the dark screen. Sharp cheekbones, exhausted eyes, her mother's mouth set in the same grim line that had carried her through hostile takeovers and glass ceilings. She was 41 years old. She'd sacrificed everything to build this. Relationships. Sleep. The possibility of children. She'd become untouchable. She wondered sometimes if untouchable was just another word for alone. Across the city, across an invisible border that separated her world from his, Elijah Turner was watching his daughter's face as she asked about Christmas. Hope held up her coloring book, a princess she'd drawn with crayons worn down to nubs. "Miss Janelle said she's getting a tree this year. Can we get one too, Daddy? A little one." The eviction notice was folded in his back pocket. 30 days to vacate. But Hope's eyes were so bright, so full of a faith he didn't deserve. "Yeah, baby. We'll get a tree." The lie tasted like copper. Like the blood he'd sold twice this week at the plasma center on King Drive. $40 a session, his arm bruised and aching. That money had bought these plane tickets. That money was supposed to be for Hope's inhaler refill, but the interview couldn't wait, and miracles didn't happen to men like him unless he chased them down himself. He packed their shared backpack with care. 2 granola bars. A juice box. Hope's coloring book and the 3 crayons that still had points. His interview clothes, a button-down shirt from Goodwill, pressed with an iron he'd borrowed from Janelle, and the one pair of dress pants that still fit. His sneakers were held together with duct tape. He'd tried to clean them, scrubbing the canvas in the bathtub until his knuckles bled. But poverty had a smell you couldn't wash away. Hope zipped up her pink windbreaker, the one with the broken zipper he'd safety pinned shut. She was humming again, that tuneless melody she made up when she was happy. She trusted him. She believed he could fix everything. He prayed to a God he'd stopped believing in that today. Just this once, he wouldn't let her down. The flight left in 90 minutes. His future waited in Chicago. He had no idea salvation was waiting there too, wearing first-class heels and carrying the weight of an empire built on people like him disappearing. They boarded the same plane through different worlds. Evelyn through priority boarding, her leather carry-on gliding behind her like an obedient pet. Gate agent smiling with practiced deference. First class, 2A, window seat with extra legroom she'd never think about because she'd never known anything else. Elijah through Zone 4, Hope's hand gripping his as they shuffled down the jetway with the other economy passengers. The flight attendant's smile faltered when she saw his duct-tape shoes. Professional recovery, but he'd seen it. He always saw it. Seat 29C. Middle seat. Hope took the window, pressed her face to the glass with wonder he couldn't afford to feel. He wedged their backpack under the seat in front of him, careful not to crush the granola bars. 15 rows ahead, Evelyn accepted champagne in a crystal flute, declined the warm nuts, opened her laptop and disappeared into acquisition contracts while the plane filled with people she'd never see. Elijah pulled out a deck of cards from his pocket. 52 pieces of worn cardboard held together by habit and hope. Pick a card, any card. Hope giggled, her fingers hovering over the deck with theatrical suspense. She picked the 7 of hearts. He made it disappear, then pulled it from behind her ear. Her laugh was pure magic, the kind that made 3 years of grief feel almost survivable. Again, Daddy. Do it again. He did it again. And again. Because her laughter was the only currency that mattered. The plane leveled at cruising altitude. The hum of engines. The ding of seatbelt signs turning off. Routine pressing down like gravity. In first class, the flight attendant placed a plate in front of Evelyn. Seared shrimp with lemon butter sauce, garnished with microgreens she wouldn't eat. She took one bite. Then another. 30 seconds later, her throat began to close. She reached for her water glass. Missed. Her vision blurred at the edges. Tunnel vision closing in like a fist. The champagne flute slipped from her fingers, crystal shattering against the tray table. Someone gasped. Then everyone was gasping. Oh my God. Is she choking? Someone help her. The flight attendant lunged forward, panicked, untrained for this specific terror. Evelyn's lips were turning blue. Her hands clawed at her throat. The intercom crackled. Is there a doctor on board? We need medical assistance immediately. Silence. 53 passengers frozen in collective helplessness. A businessman pulled out his phone. Someone started praying in Spanish. Then, from economy, the creak of a seat. Elijah stood. His body moved before his mind could catch up, muscle memory overriding 3 years of trying to forget. He pushed past the beverage cart, past the frozen passengers, past the invisible wall that separated people like him from people like her. I'm a paramedic. Let me through. The flight attendant's face flooded with desperate relief. She's not breathing. Get me the first aid kit. Now. His hands knew what to do. They remembered. He tilted Evelyn's head back, checked her airway, swollen shut, anaphylaxis, maybe 2 minutes before brain damage. The first aid kit appeared. He ripped it open, found the EpiPen, jammed it into her thigh through her designer slacks. Come on. Come on. 15 seconds. 30. Her chest still wasn't moving. He positioned his fingers, ready to attempt a cricothyrotomy with a ballpoint pen if the epinephrine didn't. She gasped. A horrible, rattling sound. Then another. Her eyes flew open, wild with terror and oxygen deprivation. "You're okay," Elijah said, his voice steady despite his shaking hands. "You're breathing. Just stay calm." Behind him, Hope stood in the aisle, her coloring book clutched to her chest, watching her father save a stranger's life. Again. The cabin erupted in scattered applause. Someone was crying. The flight attendant was radioing ahead for paramedics. And Elijah Turner, invisible man in duct-taped shoes, had just pulled a billionaire back from death at 38,000 feet. He didn't know her name. He didn't know he'd just changed both their lives forever. The plane touched down at O'Hare with a screech of rubber on concrete. Elijah checked his phone. 10:52 a.m. The interview was at 11:30, downtown Chicago, 23 miles away through midday traffic. He was still shaking. Paramedics boarded before the seatbelt sign turned off, rolling a stretcher down the narrow aisle. They swarmed Evelyn with practiced efficiency. Blood pressure cuff, oxygen mask, rapid-fire questions she answered in a voice hoarse from nearly dying. A flight attendant touched Elijah's shoulder. "Sir, they'll want a statement from you. What you did was—" "I have to go." He was already standing, pulling Hope into the aisle. "Wait, your name." But he was moving, the urgency in his chest tighter than Evelyn's throat had been. The paramedics were loading her onto the stretcher. She turned her head, searching the crowd with unfocused eyes. Looking for him. He leaned close to the flight attendant, his voice low and urgent. "Tell her she's going to be okay. Tell her to follow up with her doctor about the allergy. Tell her." He stopped. What could he possibly tell a woman who lived in a universe he'd never touch? "Tell her I'm glad she's breathing." Then he melted into the sea of deplaning passengers. Hope's small hand locked in his and disappeared. They ran through O'Hare like fugitives. Past the Starbucks and Hudson News. Past businessmen on phones and tourists dragging luggage. Hope's backpack bounced against her shoulders. She didn't ask questions. She knew the drill. When Daddy ran, you ran too. He checked his phone at the taxi stand. 11:03. He had 27 minutes. The cab ride cost $43 he didn't have. He handed the driver 2 20s and a 5, watching his emergency fund evaporate. The loop rose around them, glass and steel and the weight of everything he wasn't. They pulled up to the Meditech Solutions building at 11:28. Elijah burst through the lobby doors, Hope trailing behind him, both of them sweat-soaked and gasping. The receptionist looked up, her professional smile flickering at the sight of them. "Elijah Turner. I have an 11:30 with Mr. Harrison." She checked her computer, doubt written across her face. "You're early. Just barely. He'll be with you in a moment. You can wait." "Thank you." He collapsed into a chair, his heart hammering against his ribs. Hope climbed into the seat beside him, silent and wide-eyed. The interview was a blur. Questions about medical equipment sales. Questions about his background. He told them about his paramedic certification, his years in emergency response, left out the part about scrubbing toilets and selling his plasma and saving a billionaire's life 90 minutes ago. Mr. Harrison shook his hand at the end. "We'll be in touch by end of week." That meant no. That always meant no. But 3 days later, the call came. The job was his. Across the city, in a private room at Northwestern Memorial Hospital, Evelyn Whitmore woke to the smell of antiseptic and the sound of machines beeping her survival. Grace was there, tablet in hand, relief flooding her face. "Thank God. The doctors said you were arrested twice in the ambulance." The man. Evelyn's voice was gravel. The man who saved me. Where is he? Grace hesitated. No one knows. He left before the paramedics could get his information. The flight attendant said he just vanished. Find him. Evelyn, you need to rest. Find him. She closed her eyes, but all she could see was dark hands, steady and sure, pulling her back from the edge. A little girl watching from the aisle with terrified eyes. A man who'd saved her life and asked for nothing. Not even his name. Grace pulled out her phone. I'll make some calls. But Elijah Turner had already disappeared into the city's sprawl, into the invisible places where people like him survived. He had no idea that being found was inevitable. That gratitude in the hands of the powerful was a relentless force more unstoppable than death. Evelyn couldn't sleep. 3 nights in the hospital, then 5 more in her penthouse with round-the-clock nursing care, and all she could see were those hands. Dark, calloused, steady when hers were failing. She'd built an empire on control, on knowing every variable, every risk, every person in every room. But a man had saved her life and vanished like smoke, and it was driving her insane. On day 6, she called Marcus Webb. He arrived at her office within the hour. 62 years old, former FBI, the kind of man who found people who didn't want to be found. His fee was $15,000 plus expenses. She didn't blink. I need you to find someone. A passenger on United Flight 1847, Chicago to San Francisco, seat 29C. Male, black, 30s, traveling with a young daughter. No name. No contact information. He saved my life and disappeared. Marcus pulled out a leather notebook. That's not much to work with. Then work with what you have. I want him found. I don't care what it costs. 72 hours later, Marcus returned with a file 3 inches thick. Elijah Marcus Turner. Age 34. Former paramedic, certified 2015. License lapsed 2022. Widowed. 1 dependent, daughter Hope Elizabeth Turner, age 8. Current employment, 3 part-time positions. Warehouse loader at Amazon, night custodian at a medical complex, weekend inventory at Target. Evelyn opened the file. A DMV photo stared back at her. The same face. The same eyes that had looked into hers and refused to let her die. Marcus continued, his voice flat with facts that felt like bullets. Total debt, $89,340. Medical bills from his wife's cancer treatment. Sarah and Turner died March 2022 after insurance denied coverage for experimental immunotherapy. Out-of-pocket costs exceeded $340,000. He declared bankruptcy 6 months after her death. Discharged most of it, but medical liens remain. Evelyn's hands went cold. Current residence. Basement apartment. Gary, Indiana. $680 a month. Eviction notice filed January 8. 30 days to vacate. Marcus slid another document across her desk. He just started a new job, medical equipment sales, $55,000 a year. He's trying. She couldn't breathe. The same tightness in her chest, but this time it wasn't anaphylaxis. It was something worse. The insurance company that denied his wife's treatment. Which one? Marcus checked his notes. Healthbridge Corporation. They're a subsidiary of PharmaCorp. Her voice was barely a whisper. I know. I own 18% of PharmaCorp. My portfolio, my profits. She looked up at Marcus, and for the first time in her adult life, she felt small. I got rich off people like his wife dying. Marcus said nothing. Facts didn't require commentary. Evelyn turned the pages slowly. Sarah Turner's medical records. Denial letters stamped with corporate logos. Treatment too experimental. Not medically necessary. Patient responsibility. $127,000 for a single round of immunotherapy that might have saved her life. Then the bankruptcy filing. The itemized list of everything Elijah Turner had lost trying to save the woman he loved. Their home. Their car. His career. His future. And 6 weeks ago, he'd stood up on a plane and saved the life of a woman who'd profited from his wife's death. He'd asked for nothing. Not even his name. Evelyn closed the file. Her hands were shaking. I need his address. His phone number. Everything. Ms. Whitmore, if I may, what are you planning to do? She looked out at Chicago, at the empire she'd built on balance sheets and calculated risks and the invisible suffering of people she'd never had to see. I don't know yet, she said. But I owe him more than gratitude. She owed him the truth. And the truth was going to cost her everything she'd spent 12 years building. The Planet Fitness parking lot in Gary, Indiana looked nothing like Evelyn's world. Cracked asphalt. Flickering streetlights. A handful of cars scattered across spaces meant for hundreds. Marcus had given her the details. Elijah had a membership here, $10 a month, cheapest gym in the city. He used it for the showers. Sometimes he slept in the parking lot between shifts. Evelyn's driver pulled up at 6:43 a.m., the town car obscenely out of place. She told him to wait, then walked across the lot to the Honda Civic with the duct-taped bumper and expired registration sticker. Elijah was asleep in the driver's seat, his head tilted against the window, a jacket balled up as a pillow. In the back seat, Hope slept under a donated blanket, her face peaceful in the dawn light. Evelyn knocked on the window. Elijah jerked awake, disoriented, his hand instinctively reaching for his daughter. Then he saw her. Recognition flooded his face, followed immediately by panic. He rolled down the window 2 inches. What do you want? To thank you. You saved my life and I never. You found me. His voice was flat, hollow. Of course you found me. You people always find what you're looking for. I just wanted to. To what? He opened the car door, forcing her to step back, and climbed out. He was still wearing his Amazon warehouse uniform, the reflective vest over a shirt that smelled like sweat and cardboard and exhaustion. To feel better about yourself? To write me a check and make this a nice little story you can tell at cocktail parties. No, You know what I saw when I looked you up? His voice was rising now. 3 years of rage finally finding a target. Evelyn Whitmore. Tech billionaire. Pharmaceutical investor. You own 18% of PharmaCorp. You know what PharmaCorp did. Evelyn's throat tightened. I know. No, you don't know. He was shaking now, tears burning in his eyes. They denied my wife's treatment. Stage 3 breast cancer. The immunotherapy that might have saved her. They said it was experimental. Not medically necessary. Patient responsibility. $340,000. We had insurance. We paid our premiums. And they let her die because saving her wasn't profitable enough. Mr. Turner. I sold our house. I drained our savings. I worked 3 jobs and it still wasn't enough. She died in a hospice bed. And do you know what she said to me? She apologized. For being expensive. For costing too much. Evelyn felt like she was drowning again, but this time no one was coming to save her. You got rich off that, Elijah continued, his voice breaking. Off people like Sarah dying because the math didn't work in their favor. And then I saved your life. I stood up on that plane and I saved you, and I didn't even know. I didn't know the woman I was pulling back from death had made a fortune from mine. You're right. The words stopped him cold. "You're right," Evelyn repeated, her voice steady despite the tears streaming down her face. "I've been complicit. I've built my wealth on a system that treats people like numbers, like acceptable losses. I didn't know your story, but I should have. I should have known all the stories. And I didn't because it was easier not to." Elijah stared at her, his anger warring with something else. Surprise. Maybe recognition. "So what now?" he asked. "You say you're sorry and go back to your tower and nothing changes?" No. She reached into her bag, pulled out the file Marcus had given her. "Now I listen. Tell me about Sarah. Tell me what I need to know." For the first time in her life, Evelyn Whitmore stood in a parking lot at dawn and listened to someone tell her the truth about what her money had cost. And she didn't leave. The certified letter arrived on a Tuesday afternoon, delivered to the new job Elijah had been working for exactly 14 days. The receptionist handed it to him with raised eyebrows, thick envelope, law firm return address, the kind of mail that meant either salvation or ruin. He waited until his lunch break to open it, sat in his car in the parking lot, Hope's booster seat still in the back, and tore the seal with trembling hands. The first document made his vision blur. A payment confirmation from Healthbridge Collections. Medical debt balance. $89,340. Amount paid. $89,340. Account status. Closed. Paid in full by Evelyn J. Whitmore on behalf of Elijah M. Turner. He couldn't breathe. The second document. Auto loan statement. Balance. $4,200. Paid in full. The third, receipt from his landlord. 3 months back rent. Eviction notice canceled. Then paperclip to a letter on Whitmore Foundation letterhead. A job offer. Director of Community Health Outreach. Salary. $95,000 annually. Full medical benefits, dental, vision. Housing assistance program eligible. Start date negotiable. Elijah read it 3 times. Then he crumpled the letter in his fist and threw it across the car. She'd bought him. That's what this was. Guilt money. Charity. The billionaire's way of making herself feel better while keeping him exactly where people like him belonged. Grateful, manageable, owned. His phone buzzed. A text from Janelle. "Hope's inhaler is almost empty. Do you have the refill money?" He looked at the crumpled letter on the passenger seat. Looked at his bank account on his phone. $347. The inhaler refill cost $287, which left $60 for gas and food until his next paycheck in 10 days. His pride was screaming at him to refuse, to send everything back, to prove he wasn't for sale. But Hope's wheezing kept him awake at night. The sound of her struggling to breathe, small chest rising and falling too fast, was worse than any insult to his dignity. He smoothed out the letter. Read it again. $95,000. Health insurance. Housing assistance. The words felt like a trap and a lifeline at the same time. That night, after he put Hope to bed in Janelle's guest room, he called the number at the bottom of the letter. A woman answered on the second ring. Professional. Polite. "I need to speak with Evelyn Whitmore." "Ms. Whitmore is unavailable, but I can." "Tell her Elijah Turner called. Tell her I'll take the job." He paused, hating himself. "And tell her thank you." He hung up before she could respond. The acceptance paperwork arrived the next morning. He signed every page, his handwriting tight and angry. Signed his daughter's future. Signed away the right to refuse help from the woman whose wealth was built on his wife's grave. He hated every signature. But when Hope's new inhaler arrived 3 days later, covered in full by his new insurance, and she breathed easy for the first time in months. He hated himself a little less. Maybe survival didn't have to look like dignity. Maybe sometimes it just looked like a father choosing his daughter's breath over his own pride. 2 weeks later, he and Hope moved into foundation housing in Evanston. 2 bedrooms. Working heat. A kitchen table that wasn't a card table. Hope ran through the apartment like it was a palace, her laughter echoing off walls that didn't belong to a basement. Elijah stood in the doorway and wondered what the cost of this salvation would be. He was about to find out. The Whitmore Foundation offices occupied the 48th floor, one below Evelyn's empire. Floor-to-ceiling windows, ergonomic chairs, coffee that didn't taste like burnt desperation. Elijah's desk faced east, Lake Michigan stretching out like a promise he didn't trust yet. His first meeting with Evelyn was scheduled for 9 a.m. She arrived at 8:58, punctual and guarded. They sat across from each other in the conference room, 2 people who'd saved each other's lives now forced to figure out how to work together. "I want to expand our community health clinics," Evelyn said, sliding a proposal across the table. "Underserved neighborhoods. Free primary care. Your job is to identify the locations and build the programs." Elijah scanned the document. The proposed sites were in the wrong neighborhoods. Clean. Gentrified. Not where the need actually lived. These locations won't work. Evelyn's jaw tightened. Why not? Because poor people don't live where you think they do. He pulled out his phone, opened a map. "You want to help? Put a clinic here. And here. Where the bus routes actually go. Where people work 3 jobs and can't afford to miss a shift for a doctor's appointment." Silence. Then, "Show me." Over the next 6 weeks, they fell into an uneasy rhythm. Evelyn would propose something born from boardroom logic. Elijah would tear it apart with lived experience. She'd bristle. He'd push back. Slowly, painfully, they started listening to each other. She asked him about pharmacy deserts. He explained why a free clinic 15 miles away might as well be on Mars if you don't have a car. She challenged his cynicism about corporate philanthropy. He showed her the math of how her foundation's overhead costs could fund insulin for 300 patients. The tension between them never fully disappeared. His resentment. Her guilt. The invisible wall built from the fact that she'd profited from the system that destroyed him. But underneath it something else was growing. Respect. Maybe even trust. Hope made it easier. She loved the foundation offices, loved the free snacks and the view, and most of all, loved Evelyn. She'd wander into meetings, coloring book under her arm, and climb into the chair beside Miss Evie like she belonged there. "Miss Evie, can you help me color this princess?" Evelyn would glance at Elijah, permission granted with a tired nod, and spend 20 minutes carefully staying inside the lines while Hope narrated elaborate stories about castles and dragons. Elijah watched them together and felt something crack open in his chest. Something that felt dangerously like hope. But Sebastian Whitmore was watching too. He'd seen the debt payments. Seen his sister's sudden obsession with community health. Seen the man from Gary, Indiana, sitting in foundation meetings like he had a right to be there. Sebastian had spent 12 years waiting for Evelyn to slip, and now she'd handed him the ammunition herself. He called a board member. Then another. Quiet conversations about optics. About liability. About a billionaire playing savior to a man who might be playing her. "I'm concerned about my sister's judgment," Sebastian said over lunch at the Chicago Club, his voice dripping with brotherly worry. "This Elijah Turner, there's history there. Complicated history. I think we need to protect her from making a mistake that could damage everything she's built." The board member leaned forward, interested. "What kind of mistake?" Sebastian smiled. "Let me show you what I've found." While Elijah and Evelyn were learning to build something real, Sebastian was building a case to destroy them both. The gala was 6 weeks away. He'd have everything ready by then. The Whitmore Foundation Gala was the social event of the season. The Four Seasons ballroom glittered with wealth. Crystal chandeliers, champagne towers, women in gowns that cost more than Elijah used to make in a year. He stood near the bar in a borrowed tuxedo that almost fit, watching Hope twirl across the dance floor in a donated dress, her laughter cutting through the suffocating elegance. Evelyn found him there, stunning in midnight blue silk. "You okay?" "I don't belong here." "Neither do I. Not anymore." She touched his hand briefly, a gesture that would have been invisible 6 months ago but now felt like a declaration. Sebastian watched from across the room. His moment finally arrived. The lights dimmed. A spotlight hit the stage. Sebastian approached the microphone, his smile sharp as a scalpel. "Good evening, everyone. I want to talk about my sister's remarkable work with the foundation. Her generosity. Her vision." He paused. "And her judgment." The room shifted. Evelyn went rigid. Sebastian clicked a remote. The massive screens flanking the stage blazed to life. Elijah's eviction notice. His bankruptcy filings. Sarah's death certificate. Medical bills with denied stamped in red. "This is Elijah Turner. Some of you may have seen him here tonight. My sister has paid off his debts. $89,000. Given him a 6-figure job. Housing. All because he performed a simple medical procedure on a flight." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Cameras turned toward Elijah. He felt Hope's hand slip into his, small and trembling. "I have to wonder," Sebastian continued, "if we're witnessing philanthropy or exploitation. A man using his dead wife's tragedy to manipulate my sister's guilt. A charity case becoming a liability that could jeopardize everything this foundation represents." The room erupted in whispers. Elijah stood to leave, but Hope held his hand tighter. "Don't run, Daddy. Not this time." Her voice, small but fierce, stopped him cold. Evelyn walked to the stage. Sebastian stepped aside, confident in his victory. She stood at the microphone, looking out at the sea of faces that had once mattered to her. "My brother is right." Her voice cut through the chaos. "I have been reckless. I built my fortune investing in pharmaceutical companies that deny life-saving treatments to maximize profit. Companies like PharmaCorp, whose policies killed Sarah Turner and thousands like her. I made billions while people died. And then one of those people, a man I'd rendered invisible through my indifference, saved my life anyway." The room went silent. "So here's what I'm doing. Effective immediately, I'm divesting from PharmaCorp. I'm liquidating $200 million to fund free clinics in every underserved community in the Midwest. No insurance required. No one turned away." She turned to Sebastian. "And you're fired. Forensic accounting found $3.8 million you've embezzled over 5 years. Security is waiting outside." Sebastian's face drained of color. "You're bluffing." "Am I?" She nodded toward the ballroom entrance. 2 security officers stepped forward. "You wanted to protect the foundation's reputation. Consider yourself protected from." As Sebastian was escorted out in handcuffs, cameras flashing, the room erupted. Some guests stood and applauded. Others fled. Evelyn walked off the stage and straight to Elijah. "I'm sorry," she said. "For all of it." He looked at her, really looked, and saw not a billionaire, not his savior, but a woman who'd chosen truth over empire. "Thank you," he said, "for listening." Hope threw her arms around both of them, and for the first time, Elijah felt like maybe they could build something real from the wreckage. 18 months later, Gate B-17 at O'Hare looked different. Elijah saw that now. Same worn carpet, same fluorescent lights, but he was different, so everything else was too. Hope pressed her face against the window, watching planes taxi across the tarmac. 10 years old now, thriving in a school where she had friends and a permanent address and an inhaler that never ran out. She wore new sneakers, not because the old ones were held together with duct tape, but because she'd outgrown them. "Daddy, is Grandma's grave pretty?" "Yeah, baby. It's in a place with mountains." She would have liked it. He'd never been able to afford the trip to Phoenix before. Never been able to visit his mother's resting place. Never been able to say the goodbye that had been stolen by poverty and impossible choices. But today he could. Today he had the time, the money, the space to grieve properly. Evelyn appeared with 3 coffees, her first-class ticket clutched in one hand. She'd changed too. Less armor. More lightness. The foundation had become her full-time work, the empire relegated to managers while she did the thing that actually mattered. "They're boarding soon." She handed Elijah his coffee, black with 1 sugar, the way he liked it. She knew that now. She knew a lot of things about him now. "You don't have to sit with us in economy," Elijah said. "You paid for first class." "I know." She smiled. "But you two are back here, so I'm back here." They boarded together. Row 29, seats C, D, and E. Elijah took the window this time. Hope sat between them, already pulling out her sketch pad. Her world expanded beyond survival into creativity. As the plane taxied toward the runway, Elijah felt the old fear rising. The last time he'd been on a plane, everything had changed. He'd saved a life, ran toward an impossible future, started believing again in things he'd thought were gone forever. Hope squeezed his hand. Evelyn touched his shoulder. The plane lifted off. This time Elijah didn't close his eyes. He looked out the window and watched Chicago fall away beneath them. The city where he'd been invisible, where he'd scraped and struggled and nearly disappeared entirely. Where he'd learned that being seen was terrifying. Where he'd learned it was also necessary. The clinics were real now. 12 of them across the Midwest. His vision brought to life. People who looked like him, who'd lived like him, were getting care without shame, without bankruptcy, without choosing between medication and rent. Hope was thriving. Evelyn was healing. And he was home. Not in a place, but in himself. "You okay?" Evelyn asked softly. Elijah smiled, really smiled for the first time in years. "Yeah, I'm good." Below them, the world stretched out in possibility. Above them, nothing but sky. And between them, a family built not from blood or circumstance, but from the radical choice to see each other's humanity and refuse to look away. He was visible now. He was seen. He was, finally, beautifully alive. Thank you for watching all the way to the end. If you thought this story was intense, the next one is on a whole different level. Wilder, intriguing, and even more addictive. Click the video on your screen right now and dive straight into it.